I'm very proud of him. He's an amazing guy. Absolutely.
All right, guys, we're live on Periscope now, and
Okay.
let me get the Facebook feed going, and we'll be good to go.
We're going high tech. Yeah.
Thanks to everybody who's joining. People are starting to come on in, so I got 4 or 5 here on Periscope already. Let me get this Facebook up. Okay.
Have to get me some coffee. It's too late.
All right. Okay, so the Facebook feed is up. Let me just make sure one thing, and then we're good to go. All right, I think we're good to go. Everything is up. Everything looks good. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dr. Peter Ely, and I am just a lover of the Lord and just lover of social justice and all things good. Tonight we wanted to do the first of a series that we're calling the Town Hall Meeting. And the way this came about, a couple of days ago, I was on Twitter, and when I was on Twitter, I came across this article, this research study that was written by by the Barna Group, and it was called Black Lives Matter and Racial Tension in America. And I just found it very interesting as I read the article, some of the things that were coming out of this. You know, we know right now in our country there's a lot of racial tension, also a lot of political tension, and everything that's going on with that. And I just found it very interesting, you know, some of the things that this article or this research paper come up with, that they actually went out and they actually got, they interviewed 1,000 evangelical Christians, and the Christians had some interesting things to say from what the researcher said. So what I've done here, I have a group of gentlemen here with us tonight, and I appreciate their time coming. We try to do this here at 10 o'clock, and you all can't hear me. Make sure we lost the audio. Okay, let's see here. You guys can't hear me anymore? Oh, man. Well, you know technology, how technology would act. Come on. It's all clear over there. You know, everybody else can hear me, but y'all can't hear me. Hopefully, hold on, let me make sure everything here is good. You know, technology would act up when we want it and need it the most. So, I don't know what's going on with my participants, why they can't hear me, because we're about to get very interested in this conversation. Guys, are y'all there? Can y'all hear me? You can hear me? I can't hear none of y'all all of a sudden now. Oh, man. Give me 1 second here. I know on Facebook Live and Periscope, y'all can hear me well, but they can't seem to hear me no more. Okay, see, yeah. Okay, hold on 1 second. Can y'all guys hear me now? Come on. The devil is a lie. I'm not going to let him get on. Oh, my goodness. Why can't I not hear these other guys now? Oh, there's somebody coming back in.
We're here.
Okay, y'all can all hear now again?
We can hear you now. You lost it all. I hear you.
Okay, I don't know what that was, but anyway, like I said, the devil was a lie. As soon as I said that, God opened it back up. I appreciate that. Thank you, Lord. All right, so what we were saying is we're having just a town hall discussion. So what I'm asking you, many of you as possible, those of my followers on Facebook and those who follow me on Twitter, I ask that you go in right now and you share this, because we want this conversation to be larger. And what we're going to also do is we're going to open this up to you to ask some questions of my panelists here on today. So I'm just here to moderate on today and to keep the conversation going. But I believe there's a lot to be said here, and there's a lot for us to talk about as we talk to our different panelists here. So if you notice in my top left corner is Michael Kelly, Pastor Michael Kelly. He's pastor of Central Triad Church here in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And the church's church makeup is about 50-50, so it's fairly diverse racially, and he's a born-again believer and evangelical. Right below him is Mr. Kelvin Watson, a really good friend of mine. Went to school together, and I always tell him he almost had me being a Black Panther one time. But I really appreciate Kelvin and his insight there on all things in the African American culture, and he would speak from that point of view and talk with concerning the Black Lives Matter. And then right to my right, you see Bishop Reginald Davis. Bishop Reginald Davis is pastor of Refuge Temple in Burlington, North Carolina. Former history teacher, and he's a Tar Heel, so we forgive him, okay? So, nonetheless, we all here, and yours truly. So we want to go ahead and start this conversation out. So we was reading the article from Barna, Black Lives Matter and the Racial Tension in America. So I just would like everybody just to start out with like an open statement. What did you think about it? And from what you thought about it, let's start the conversation out there. So we'll start with you, Michael. You can just tell us, what did you think about the article and what was you gleaming from that?
Well, first of all, Barna is well known for putting together quality statistics of this nature. So for that, I have a lot of credit in what I'm reading here. I was a little surprised in what I was seeing in some cases. In other cases, kind of thought, well, that's what I would expect, But when I read this about racial tension, and of course, is racism is a part of the past or the present? I think when I saw those areas, I was a little surprised by the overall numbers of what it looked like. And so I'm looking forward to the conversation, because I think we need to have the conversations that we've been afraid to have. I think we've been unable to have them in a healthy dialogue and healthy way. So I hope tonight is a way of finding unity and understanding so that we can do what God's called me to do, and for all of us to learn to do what we're supposed to do, even just as Americans.
All right, Mr. Watson.
Yeah, it was a solid article. I wasn't too surprised when I read the evangelicals and the conservatives, their viewpoint about African Americans and how they feel about white supremacy. It's not surprising at all. And when you analyze religion and how the church either help or hurt the growth of racial tensions, I think that discussion got to be dealt with. A lot of pastors with different ethnic groups have not addressed racism or white supremacy and how that impacts their congregation, how that impacts life. It was a very credible article. I looked at some of the sources. It's solid, it's going to create dialogue for tonight. So I'm looking for a healthy conversation.
Bishop Davis?
Just in perusing the article, the data to me was a little bit surprising. And but then as I began to reflect on it, it kind of speaks to the issue that most of us don't deal with racism unless we are directly impacted by it. If you're the person denied a job and it's about race, denied option to move to a certain neighborhood, or your kids are mistreated at school, then it confronts you. So there's a connection, I think, almost with the church and the data, because by and large, the church climate has changed. That in a lot of cases, especially the African American church, we have become a very middle class, almost bourgeois kind of environment. And when we move into that vein, whether we're in an African American church or mixed cultural church, you sometimes become oblivious to what other people are dealing with and other people who share struggles. So it was eye-opening. I've always had a lot of respect for George Barna because he does a lot of very solid research about church and communities and that kind of stuff. I'm excited about this conversation because I'm in the midst of trying to ignite a social justice ministry within our church to begin to deal with some issues of racial equity, income inequality, things of that nature, because I think it's time for the church to definitely become more engaged in addressing not only the spiritual needs, but the social needs. And quite honestly, the social needs are tied to the spiritual needs. And so it's all ministry in my mind.
Okay. I heard some interesting things there right off top. And can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I hear you, brother.
Okay. Now, I found some things to be really interesting right off top while you were talking about that. Uh-oh, what did I do? While we were talking about that, and I noticed that three of us, it was very surprising to us, but I heard Mr. Watson said that this wasn't surprising at all. If it wasn't surprising to you, Mr. Watson, why do you think it was so much? I mean, two of us are African American, one Caucasian, and I like to think that I'm well learned. Like Bishop Davis, college educated, well learned, and some of these things were a little bit surprising to us. Could it be, from a church point of view that we see these things? I want to hear you to expound a little bit on that contrast, and then everybody else would just come in and give thought and comment.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the largest segregated days is on Sundays or Saturday, the Sabbath. And when the church has not really addressed social inequality and how racism impacts marginalized groups, particularly African American, there's a void. And when that void is not addressed, then we use religion as a way to sugarcoat it. We create a spiritual realm dealing with racism. If we can work with God, or God can work with people, instead of addressing the institutionalized practices and policies that directly affect African Americans or Latinos. So I was not surprised, because I work in this field every day and I see structural racism. I see the youth and juveniles locked up. I see those that are hustling. And I look at the religious leaders as leaders, but they're not catching the ear of the youth, because they are using a paradigm that I think that's not effectively reaching people anymore. And the church is a great place to worship, take care of those that need it. But right now, they must shift their focus and grab the youth and those that really need it. And we are not going to church. We're not listening to our spiritual leaders, because we feel, particularly African Americans, when an atrocity happened, like an unarmed black kid being shot, one of the first things we do is pray, or we march, or we have a press conference, and then that's it. So the paradigm must shift. We need some direct action, not just marches, but some serious action must be taken. Then I think the youth will be willing to listen and follow the lead of those church leaders.
If I can piggyback, I'm in agreement to a lot of what my brother just shared. I think the only lens that I want to look at it differently with is that in a lot of cases, the church has been the vehicle for development, not only spiritually, but educationally and socially. All right. I'm a child of poverty, grew up in poverty, and my exposure to my faith is what helped shift my paradigm out of poverty into a success track, into college, into a career, in addition to ministry. Okay. So on an individual basis, the church is impacting individuals. I'm one of them. Had it not been for the church, I would certainly be a statistic. I'm the product of a single parent household, food stamps, welfare, projects. That's my whole story. All right. The church was my transformation vehicle. And for a lot of individuals, it's been a transformation vehicle. I agree with your point. Institutionally, we've become disconnected. And so now churches sometimes sit as almost exclusive islands and country clubs where only certain people have access. And the church has got to reconnect with the community. Even if everybody doesn't get saved, doesn't come in and get baptized, the church has got to be seen as that haven, that refuge, that place of respite that anybody can come to and find solace, security, safety, and mechanisms to begin to address the social needs. But I think what I've seen is an individual transformation and not the broad transformation that the church once had. And I don't know if the other folks want to share my thoughts, but that's kind of, when I listen to what you said, I echo it. But I think the only nuance is that we've done it individually, but not systemically, if that makes any sense.
Yes.
I will go ahead and address the elephant in the room. I'm the white guy in this conversation.
Really?
Yes. Let's go ahead and acknowledge it. All right. So, and I'll go ahead and say, I grew up in the church. So it was from my very beginning is how it was for me and how it still is. And what that means to me is, and I'll be very honest with you, coming from where I came from in Texas, I didn't even understand some of the issues that we were struggling with in our nation, among the black community, among minorities. Didn't know much about it, didn't understand it much because I wasn't really around the scenario that much. I come to North Carolina, and all of a sudden the world gets opened up, and I begin to see, and I'm so thankful for this incredible church here because there is such a unity among all of us. I begin to learn a lot more then. I begin to learn about the different issues and why we are separated on many levels when we shouldn't be. I think you made a great point, Kelvin, that Sunday is the most racially divided day of the week. It's horrific. That's what's happened. And I think that because of what I've had to come through in the process of learning about others, the Word of God tells me, and here I am, the evangelical, but it tells me to love everybody. So I've always had that approach. I'm just loving people. But I didn't understand what everyone was struggling with outside the walls of the church. So now I've had to come into this knowledge of learning. There are real issues facing people that walk in these doors every Sunday beyond just being a Christian. And so I'm hoping that these kind of conversations help us then to create more healing and then cause us to develop together as a people because we have to. And I'm thankful for, being able to learn and listen and glean because I think that's what we have to do with each other is learn and listen and glean from what's happening around us.
Absolutely.
So I know we have the group that's just kind of sprung, this new group called Black Lives Matter, and here, recently, I guess in the last couple of months, they kind of pull out what are their tenets or their focus on, and one of the things we talk about is social disadvantage for people of color, and in this article, Barna talks about, said people of color are often put at a social disadvantage because of their race, and he gives these statistics. Black people believe that at 84%, white 62%. Then he goes in and then he breaks into the politics of it. It said Republicans at 57%, which is one of the lowest ones here. And then Democrats believe that at 78%. And then evangelicals, the born again church, at 56%, meaning that they're the lowest out of this whole group. And this is out of 67% of, so overall 67% of adults believe that that black people are socially because of their color, socially disadvantaged because of their color. However, the Christian church as a whole is the lowest on this, meaning that they don't believe a problem, and almost in general doesn't exist. Let's speak to that a little bit. Is that part of the problem? Because I hear Kelvin saying that needs to be a paradigm shift, but before there can be a paradigm shift, we must acknowledge that there is indeed a problem. And right now, the way the numbers are saying, this is not Peter, but what he's saying in his research is that the church don't believe a problem exists. But it's talking about being people of color being disadvantaged. So let's try to speak to that a little bit and what we think.
And I think that speaks to what I shared a moment ago. Because even in the black church, because individuals in the black church, their lives have become better. Their lives have become enriched. Their lives, they've experienced some of it as a result of their faith. I mean, I'm a clear witness that, my faith in God, the support of my church, support of my family helped catapult me, as I said, from what could have been the poverty, jail, street hustling, because it was all there for me. It was very much there for me. I started shoplifting at 7 years old, so I could have very easily seen myself on a different path. And being a child of poverty, that path would have led me to jail. Church, grace of God, word of God rescued my life. And so once again, if you have that paradigm and you're following the word, favor's blessing you, you're being blessed because you're in obedience to the word, then you start to become almost isolated to even knowing there's a problem. Mm-hmm. And if we look at demographics of who's actually going to church right now, at least in my case, I pastor a fairly diverse congregation in terms of we have some ethnic differences, but some social differences, backgrounds, education levels. But for the most part, we're a blessed church. Our folks are middle income, middle class, college educated people. And so it is very easy if that is your environment that's where you work, that's where you live, that's where you go to church, to really walk away saying there is no problem. If they just got saved, everything would be all right.
Right.
And we forget that there are people, scores of people living in poverty, living in violence, who are not bad people. They're good people. They've just found themselves in a paradigm that's destructive. And to a great degree, even churches that are in minority communities, in the middle of the hood, most of the people who go to those churches don't live in those neighborhoods. And so they're only there because they're there. They're not there because they're connected. They're not there because they're involved. In fact, they chain the church up and lock the door and walk away. And they complain about how bad the neighborhood is. In a lot of cases, when the church gets enough money, they leave that neighborhood and go somewhere else to share. And as a result, the church loses connection with what I think is its main mission. Our mission, the mission of the church, is to change the world, which means we should be paradigm shifting on a regular basis. But it goes back to the fact that we have got to become re-engaged with the communities that we've been assigned to serve. And in all honesty, I think my pastor friend will bear this out. Evangelism has become a very lost art in the church. And when I mean, we do Facebook, we do streaming, we do, television, radio, and what have you. But that face-to-face, door-to-door connection, where you're meeting streets, where you're finding people who are in trouble, where you're meeting people who are destitute or who are impoverished or who are the victims of racism, that type of connection doesn't exist in most churches. In most cases, we don't even go where the people are that need us the most. We don't serve where the people need us the most. And when I say we, I'm putting myself in this equation, because in a lot of cases, I've been mainly interested in preaching to my congregation, feeding them, nurturing them, ministering to their needs, but I really haven't taken the outlook in the past that I should have taken as a minister. I'm going to confess that. I haven't taken that outlook because I've been mainly concerned about just simply trying to grow the work and keep everybody moving and win those that happen to stumble into my doors, but not to really engage in something that will bless the community. I will confess I've been remiss in that responsibility.
If the church is not using their message for social change or revolutionary change, then it's gonna lose a lot of young people.
Absolutely.
Particularly myself. They really need to change their thinking, their thought patterns about engaging in social justice. We are not winning this war on racism. And we have a lot of preachers throughout the nation. And they know what to expect from most preachers. Many will say a sermon. Many will say a prayer. They have a prayer visual. They'll talk about the good things and the power of the powerful God. But yet when it comes to black people and justice in the United States, it seems that God is not listening or God is not working on our behalf. And when we ask these real questions about Black Lives Matter, our lives do matter, but systemically, the dominant culture does not recognize our lives. Never have, they never will, because they're rooted in hate, it's rooted in injustice and inequality. So the church must become like the historical churches of the 18th and 19th centuries, when they were advocating serious social change. When we talk about change, we talk about some real thinkers who was pushing the envelope of freedom, justice, and equality. If we're not hearkening back to those times and using that message to galvanize our community, the churches can continue to, fail, because the youth want something more potent, something powerful. If these cops are killing us unarmed, and they are not being brought to justice by the Justice Department or by the town, city, state that they live in, there must be another answer. And my answer is very radical. If a cop shoots an unarmed black man, woman, or child, that cop should be shot or that cop should be killed. And then the narrative will change with Black Lives Matter. Until we change that narrative and our focus, they're going to continue to kill us and shoot us. And we can't wait on anyone to help advocate our change. Until we change and say, we're going to go get those guys and we're going to bring them justice, our own justice. Then the young people can say, oh, y'all are serious. But I know that's not in the doctrine of the church. I understand that.
Well, you're right. It's not in the doctrine of the church, because violence which is going to be more violence. That's something that's never going to solve any kind of major problem. I do know this: when the atmosphere of the church, if a church is healthy, first of all, great change comes because we learn that we come in a relationship with each other. We learn who each other are. We learn who we are together. In a healthy church, and I think this is something we're missing here, and that is when a church is healthy, these dialogues can happen on the pew, from the platform to the pew, from the pew to the platform, back and forth. People are getting together that wouldn't ordinarily do it in the life outside the church because of where we live and where we go, and where we shop, and all that kind of thing. But in the church, it's healthy. We're having these kind of conversations. That's why when I said earlier about the church here in Winston-Salem, I'm not bragging to get the name out there. I'm just saying these are the conversations we have in the church because it's a healthy, safe place to have it. Now, once we're able to have those relationships, then we begin to see where each of us are struggling. And then that leads us to make changes publicly. And I understand the frustration of what you just spoke, but to think that the answer would be to kill more or to kill a cop over these issues is going to solve the problem or inspire others.
Oh, it will, because if they take a black life, we take their life. They kill us, we kill them. Not just any old cop, but those cops that's doing the shooting and the killings. If we kill them, the narrative would change the next day. If white men and women and kids were being slaughtered on the streets and it was being recorded live, it'd be another narrative. It'd be an outcry. When those kids at Sandy Hook School were murdered, man, the president cried. People were like, oh my God, how can he shoot kids? But in the city of Chicago, there's been over 2,600 murders and shootings this year. And there's no national outcry. They do not care about black people. So if you're going to kill us, we're going to kill them. It's very simple. Well, I don't believe in forgiving them. I ain't praying for them. I'm praying that we go get them and bring our own justice to them. And that's how uncompromising we got to be. Right now, the church is keeping us compromising because they know what to use. This is not Jesus' teaching. Jesus doesn't teach that. No, Jesus was a revolutionary that walked in the Roman's house with a sword and turned over the tables, dealing with their money. Radical. He rolled with guys that carry weapons. If you're not bringing that kind of message about Jesus, you're doing yourself a disservice.
He did do that. He did roll in. He did have guys that were armed with him. There's proof of that. Peter Croft won the soldier's ears at one point in time. At the same time, his message wasn't about fighting. It was about loving. It was about forgiving. It was about grace. It was about reaching out to people you wouldn't normally connect to. The message the church is teaching, I believe, and as a matter of fact, in this Barna report, also believes the message the church teaches, if it ever becomes a national understanding, is a way of bringing about peace and strength and unity and racial unity. But because the message is about learning to love each other, forgiving each other, walking in grace with each other, doing these things gives us the strength to overcome together, not to divide us even greater. So yes, Jesus was a radical, but his message that was so radical wasn't about killing. It was about being willing to die for and loving to forgive. That was the point.
The church has survived over 2,000 years, not because of its physical prowess or its weaponry or its armament. It survived because its message has survived, and that's the message of grace and love. I think the one point that we don't do as a church that we have to lend ourselves to is the church has to become the voice and the prophetic voice of social justice. Yeah. If you read the Minor Prophets, there was always an outcry about oppression. There was an outcry about injustice, an outcry about unfair dealings, the oppression of the mighty upon the weak. And that has become a lost message in the church. We tend to preach grace, love, salvation, and really just personal empowerment and personal life and living. And so we have to go back and revisit the entire scripture. And the scripture says that the voice of the prophet is to speak the truth to power. And that's what perhaps we are not doing. We're not speaking to our police chiefs. We're not speaking to our mayors. We're not speaking to our government officials, demanding that in the name of righteousness, they make these changes. And they make, and I'll be honest, sometimes we're not invited to the table. We've had a couple of murders in Burlington that were gang-related murders. And, of course, the city came into an outcry, and they started to stop the violence movement in our city. And a friend of mine stopped me and said, well, were you invited? And I was not invited. My church is right across the street from the police station. And nobody took the time to even invite us to be a part of it because they really don't want us to be a part of it. So I said, I'm now going to force my way in because we have to have a voice that speaks to this situation. And because what we don't, in my opinion, and I respect your frustration, and I've watched in horror in the Freddie Gray case that how in the world can 6 men transport 1 man, he died, and nobody be held responsible from a legal standpoint. You know, that's the most ridiculous thing in my mind. 6 guys transport 1 guy. 1 guy for what was a relatively minor crime is transported and dies in police custody, and nobody is responsible. Right. You know, and that's ridiculous, and that's uncalled for, and somebody is lying. You know, and these police officers misused the system. Instead of getting a jury trial where they knew they would be found guilty, they each went after a judge, one person sitting on a bench listening to their story. They bought the story. They started acquitting them. And the DA just gave up because he knew each one would opt for this judge trial because that became the way to get off. Somebody needs to bring a voice to that and say this is completely unreasonable, that you should not die in the hands of people who are sworn to protect and serve you. And that's where the church's main power is, because we do have a voice. We do have an audience. We've got internet ministry. We've got television. We've got radio. And sometimes we have to, you know, ask God for a word that speaks to the ills of society, because we are that prophetic voice. And that's where we failed as a church, is that we stopped being that prophetic voice, not only to our congregants, but to the power structure where we live. So the Lord didn't call for us to take up arms, and that's where we have to respectfully disagree. But he did call for us to be the voice for justice. And that's where the church has to reignite itself, reignite its members. All of our members are voters. All of our members pay taxes. They come, I don't know if it happens to Pastor Kelly here, but they come to visit us election time to make their little speeches and, you know, pass out their little flyers and say, pray for me, when they really mean vote for me. And before we give them access to our platforms, we need to know, what did they stand for? What did they believe? Because you're not going to come and solicit my congregation if I can't trust that you're going to do the right thing in the midst of what you're coming to share. Because they come to see us. They ignore us for 2.5 to 3 years, but they always sweep around the election time to come and visit church because they have voters and we're socially engaged and we're active. We have to use that leverage to not only win the lost and redeem those that don't know Christ, but to also speak specifically to the ills. We are establishing in my church a social justice ministry. That's a first for us.
But when the enemy is shooting with bullets and real guns and killing lives, we can't be unarmed. We can't just use the messages of love and forgiveness when people hate and kill us, particularly African American people. We cannot embrace them. We must say, we don't love you, we don't want you, and we're going to handle you. I'm not going to abide by the principles in the church. I can't ride with it because it's not revolutionary enough for me. It's not cutting edge. I'm not going to let you smack my cheek and I turn my other cheek. Now I'm going to punch in your face. You attack me, I'm going to attack you, I'm going to attack your family. And when black people start revolting like that, it's a different outcome. And that's what we got to remember. We got to shift the outcome and make them feel the pain that we feel. And just by having press conferences and having speeches and rallies, that ain't going to do it. And in the court of justice, we can't wait on the American justice system when this justice system does not acknowledge African American lives. In this article, the article said that Republicans or conservatives, evangelicals, they don't understand or even think that racism is a factor in the lives of black people. Doesn't make any sense because they don't care. They don't want to even acknowledge what we've been through. When you deal with 335 years of enslavement, and then 100 plus years of Jim Crow, then another 30, 40 years of institutionalized injustices, you expect us to be competitive with the dominant society. When historically we couldn't live in certain societies, we couldn't even get the financial benefit that open businesses in certain communities. And when our businesses and communities were burned to the ground and no one went to jail. This is the kind of beast we're dealing with. And that beast is not hearing our prayers or respecting our social justice by using Christ's message. We got to use a different message. We got to send a stronger message. And the message of being we all love and we all cool, that ain't happening anymore. And I'm not bringing that message.
The message is not just we're all love, we're all cool. I think the message is one of reconciliation. And you have to confront, but confronting and combating are two different things.
That's right.
And unfortunately, whereas I respect your passion and I definitely understand your frustration. I can't align myself with that level of violence,
Right.
Simply because that's not going to make it better. It's going to draw us into a chaotic state, and then the people who stand on the side of quote unquote law and order, that empowers them to become even more violent, more dangerous, more combative, and you're looking at annihilation, and genocide is what becomes the result of that.
Well, that's what's happening right now, right? It seems like they are annihilating us. It seems like this is systematic destruction of us. That's what it seems like. When not, it's been probably like 2 or 3 cops that's been found guilty out of the thousands of shootings and killings of unarmed black people.
Sure.
I mean, that looks very genocidal.
Okay, so I just want us to just harp on just that one issue because there's more to talk about. But what we was trying to get to more to, okay, we understand that there's a problem and we're identifying that it's a problem. But now let's start moving more towards solutions. What are solutions? I mean, I know we all have different things, but we want to find a point of common ground as we get forward to what is a common solution that we can get to, because I think here in Bonner says in this article, it was like that most people do believe that the church has the solution, but how do we get to that point? How do we get somebody of the mindset of Kelvin to say, look, we don't want you running in the streets with AR-15s, but then at the same time, I understand Kelvin to say, well, I want to see some action. I just don't want to see it. Your faith without works is dead to me. So how do we start moving towards that point that these social justice ministries that, you're all talking about starting and these things that Kelvin, how do we get to that common ground where it's actually going to become a good thing and we actually start to see this change that we so much need in this society?
Well, I think, Pastor Kelly made a very good point that the first piece is the conversations internally. And after in the wake of the incidences in St. Paul and Dallas, I took a Bible class night, and in lieu of just teaching Bible class, I had a dialogue just to kind of get a sense of, where my congregation was, what were their thoughts, discovered that I had people in my church that were very engaged in Black Lives Matter, which I didn't know that they were that engaged. I mean, I support, the notion, but I didn't know I had people actively engaged in that effort to speak the truth to power. That kind of reawakened in me the element that we've got to systemically begin, first of all, building internal bridges, then external bridges. That we've got to, once again, it's not about everybody necessarily joining my church, but it is about them seeing my church as a mechanism for change. That means I have to change my voice to become more of an advocate, more of a speech, because, whatever you want to say about the church as being ineffective in changing, we are a voice and we are a presence. And usually when the preacher calls the mayor, when I call the city manager, he calls me back. All right. When I call the mayor's office, he calls me back because they know you represent not only yourself, but a group of people who are taxpayers, voters, and engaged in society. We have to do more of that so that people see us as a mechanism, because people come to church all the time. They call me every week if they need to get their bills paid. They call me if they are having a problem. Call me, and they're not members of my church, but if they just see us in the phone book, they engage us. So I want to be to a point that my kids having a problem in school, would you go with me to the school to talk to them? Because some of our parents don't know how to talk to people in school to get answers. They get dismissed as being ignorant and unlearned. And once again, I'm a veteran retired principal. I can go with them to the school to meet with the principal and say, let's talk about this problem and create a solution. That's the voice we have to connect with. That empowers us because now we're more connected than just simply saying that's Refuge Temple or that's, Triad Church or whatever sitting there in the corner. That's where they are. We become a vehicle of engagement. And that's the first level, is that we have to become re-engaged with all of the needs, not just the spiritual, but the social needs of the community. We become a voice that lends ourselves. And I agree, it's not just about press conferences, but it's about taking formative action that impacts it. Sometimes it has to be case by case, one at a time. It may not be, the sweeping reform, but if I can change my block so that, there's a police review board, that if something goes down on my block, they know they're going to hear from Refuge Temple and hear from his pastor. If somebody gets arrested unjustly. I had an incident that involved Peter's sister, that she was pulled one night by a cop. And this was an African-American cop. He thought that she was not rich enough to drive the car she was driving. So he And then I had another young man who was pulled by the police because there were two young people at a stoplight. a young white man and a brother from my church. My brother from my church was playing gospel music. The white kid was playing rap music, but the cop pulled my guy because he assumed because he was black, he was the one breaking the city noise ordinance. So I called the police department and said, there's a problem. My members are being harassed. We have to start dealing with that voice and being that voice. I've done that, sporadically. I've done that on occasion. We need to find a way to do it systemically, because if they hear from us, they're going to respond to us. But if we're silent, they won't do anything. And I think our first obstacle is to overcome our silence and to begin to actively speak the truth to power.
I think that something to talk about too real quick is this. Number one, I have several officers in our church of every race, black officers, white officers, Hispanic. And I know them personally. And these are quality, solid people. So not every officer represents what's being spoke of here, number one. So I got to say that up front. There are some amazing people who sacrifice everything to protect us whenever we need them. Now, for some that don't have had negative experiences, I've had negative experiences too. I would never confess that I'm a speeder, but apparently others believe that I am. So I've been pulled over many times myself, and I've had to deal with issues many, many times. My worst experience ever was from a black officer. And I thought at one point in time he might pull his gun and shoot me. And I did everything I could to obey everything he was saying, because I didn't want to have that problem happen in my life. Having said that, these are the people that I know personally. They would lay their life down, not only for me, but for everyone that they needed to. So fighting, and the Bible says he who lives by the sword dies by the sword. Here's an issue right now. The voice of the church is being squelched, not only by our own government, but by city leaders, by the world around us. And the voice they need to hear the most is the voice we're squelching the most. The church doesn't have the validity it's supposed to have anymore. It's being shut down. And the more that's being shut down, the more we hear talk like what you just said a minute ago, Kelvin. And I understand your passion, and I appreciate your passion. But is that when the voice of the church is squelched, then you see the rise of even greater hate and greater anger. It is becoming a problem. I believe one of the ways to solve this issue is for society to quit being so afraid of hearing people that believe that there is a God, that hearing people that believe that there can be peace, there can be strength, there can be love, and realize what we have is real, and we have no problem sharing that. That's a voice to be shared with everybody. So I can't say, and I can't let that be said that officers should die. I can't go that way, because I know these men and women, and they are amazing people. Not every one of them are great. We know that, just like not every one of us is great. But we can't learn to love each other.
I'm not talking about the innocent officers that do their job, that serve and protect. I'm talking about the guilty ones that do the shootings. Those are the ones that should be held and killed. That's what I'm talking about specifically, not those that's doing their job.
But that issue would be hard to define after a while. If we started living the way you're talking living, at some point in time, it won't matter. As long as you got a blue shirt on, you're guilty. And that's why we can't go that route or that path, because it's going to make life worse.
That's how black people are living right now. We are incarcerated in our own communities without the prison bars. And when we see cops, we get nervous when they pull us over, because we don't know what's going to happen. When they come to our car, they are very aggressive because they are afraid of what may happen to them. But they got the weapons, and we don't. So you can't love those that continuously try to punish and kill you and annihilate you. We can't. And the police officer unions, they're very quiet on it. They are not doing anything to change the structural inequalities, or they're not giving them cultural sensitivity training on how to deal with those in marginalized areas and communities. They letting rookies and these vets who are probably suffer from post-traumatic disorder continue to work on the same blocks and streets for years, and they get immune to what the cries or the plight of African American people. And so they looking at us as if we're not human. And when they deal with us on that level, then you see Philandro and other brothers and sisters that's been killed. And the question is, why? Why you got to shoot to kill? Why can't you use a stun gun? Why can't you use some other method to try to diffuse the situation? And the government, state, federal, all seem to be in bed. And until a marginalized people that are powerless take the power from those in power, this will continue to happen.
So,
and my message will not be love. My message would be something completely opposite.
And
one of the things that
the issue that we're dealing with, though, is that when we resort to a vigilante culture, and that's really what you're describing, is vigilantism, then we create even more lawlessness as a result, and the innocent end up being destroyed with the wicked, and that's why I struggle with that, and I have to reject that being the answer. I think you've spoken to some areas that have to be faced, which I think is training, which I think is, and I'm going to just inject this note. One of the things that frustrated me about the young man that was killed in Minnesota was that he had a license to conceal and carry.
Yeah, right.
All right, and and I'm not going to ask where was the church. I want to know where was the NRA, because
they've been quiet.
I mean, they should have been in an uproar because one of their own, who was exercising Second Amendment rights, was killed by a police officer. And so it made me think maybe it's the WNRA, and not the NRA.
Right.
Because they said nothing about this young man being murdered. They haven't spoken anything. The man had a license, he had a permit, he had a job, he wasn't a gangbanger, and he was shot, he was murdered by the police, and his girlfriend captured it on video. And where was that organization that has put so many politicians in their back pocket? Where were they to protect one of their own? Because in my mind, he was one of their own. I don't own a weapon. I don't carry a weapon. This guy does carry a weapon, and nobody spoke up for him when he was murdered by a police officer and trying to comply with the officer's directions. So it wasn't, and so which says there's a broader problem that is not just about the church. It's about the fact that the soul of America is racially divided at its very core, and that's a spiritual and a social transformation. Because here we are, 100 years from the Emancipation Proclamation, 125, 30 years from that. Here we are, 50 years from the Civil Rights Act of 1964, 50 years from that, and we're still talking about these issues, which tells me this, and this is very, very important. You can't legislate hatred. It lives in the hearts of people.
Right.
And the only way you extinguish hatred is through love. That's the only way you can do it. All right? I've experienced racism. I've been called the N-word. I know there have been times when I've been misjudged because of my race. I've had to be a voice to people because they were acting in a racially charged manner, and I had to stop it in my career and took a hit for it because people thought I was being unfair, when in reality, I was trying to level the playing field. So I get that, but I could never allow myself to operate from a mode of hate. Yes, I got angry. Yes, I've been very angry. I've been livid at the things I have seen and witnessed in institutions designed to protect us, serve us. And I'm talking about schools, which is one of the most sometimes hellish areas for sometimes people of color. And it's not just people of color, it's people of poverty. Because generally, if you're African American, that they know you have something, they'll treat you better. It's when we mistreat the kid from the projects, whether he's white, black, or Latino, or because we know his parents, don't have a job or they're on welfare. Even the school sneers at them. And I've had to deal with that issue and address that we're going to treat everybody like a person, no matter what they look like. We're going to give them respect and accord them what belongs to them. That's the message that has to be spoken. That is not just a black or white thing. I think in America, one of the bigger divide beyond race now, the big divide is about income inequality, and that your whole life is completely different if you've got money. You get a ticket and you can pay that ticket, your life goes on. You get a ticket and you can't afford to pay that ticket, and you get your license revoked, and it happens enough times, you're going to go to jail. And it's not because you're a bad person. You're going to jail because you didn't have enough money to pay a ticket. Because the fine for a ticket is $200. And everybody don't have $200. But when we create those kind of systems that punish people for being impoverished, it punishes them. Yeah, I'm like the pastor. I won't confess to it, but some people think I speed. So I've gotten tickets, but you know what? I haven't spent a day in jail. But I literally had to bail somebody out in my church who didn't have enough money to pay off his tickets, and he got arrested. And it wasn't about the tickets; it was about the money.
Well, I like to also, Bishop, I appreciate what you're saying there, and I want to say this to it as well. I made myself watch that video that you just mentioned a few minutes ago, and I watched it over and over again. It was horrific on every level. There was something I noticed in that video that really hit me hard beyond the obvious horrific thing that was taking place with a man sitting in the car dying because he was just shot. And that was the fear that I heard coming out of the voice of the officer outside the car.
Absolutely.
And there is a level of fear in our nation as a whole that has gripped us. And it is creating that every time there's a meeting, there is an instant response. There's no question that our men and women that are officers are trained to respond certain ways. But because of this heightened level of fear that we're in right now, especially now, everything is magnified. And so when you make speeches or statements like you said a minute ago, and I'm not coming down here, I'm just saying it increases that level of fear. It heightens it even more. And so now we're dealing with that. And so fear is not something that we're supposed to be living under. How do you destroy fear? Well, through relationships, number one. Being able to know who we are to each other, talk to each other, communicate, that breaks down the level of fear. But whenever we're rising up and bringing more fear, well, the atmosphere is permeated right now. Our nation is full of fear, without question. So that makes it difficult. I'm not defending that officer. Don't think that. It was horrific what was done there. But I heard the sound. I heard it come out of his mouth.
Oh, I heard it as well, and I think it speaks to the fact. But then I thought about this country, that you can be a white young man, good intention, but spend your entire life and never interact with an African American. It's possible in where you live. If you live in a certain neighborhood, and even if you go to a school that's racially mixed, the other segregated hour is not Sunday 11 o'clock, it's lunchtime in the school. You can have a school full of African American kids, Latino kids, and white kids. But when lunchtime comes, they all group together by ethnicity. And the only reason why they interact is because the law requires that they do it. So we have a culture that literally, that may have been that officer's first encounter with an African American. And I'm not saying that justifies what he did, but if you don't have interaction and you've been told things all of your life about people who look this way, people who come from this neighborhood, people who wear their hair a certain way, then you develop these stereotypes. And that's the institutional racism that we've got to deal with, because people have created an illusion. I know very simply that when I go into certain settings, they don't see minister, they don't see UNC education, they don't see my neighborhood or my tax bracket. They see a black man. And depending on what their image of a black man is, that completely taints that conversation, that interaction, and that exposure. That's part of this social change that we've got to look at, is how do we create systems that bring people together so we stop seeing black, white, Latino, but we see individuals.
I don't know about that. I don't know. It doesn't make sense. Bring people together. Look, they got to respect us. They got to like us and want to reach out to us. I'm not reaching to them. I'm not trying to reach across the aisle to touch them. None of that. Because historically, white folks have always been the same. When they're in power, they create mayhem, terror, and they kill people. They do it through policing. They do it through government. And their behavior has not changed. And they have used religion as a tool to continue this process of hate. So black people, we got to reject this notion of wanting change and waiting on change and legislating change. No. Create change. Take change. Be forthright. Be revolutionary. We can't keep using the same paradigm. It ain't working for us. We are not gaining rewards by the same method that we've been using for 100 years. The civil rights method is outdated. Marching is outdated.
Let me interject right here.
Praying for those that want to kill you is crazy.
Let me interject right here. I don't want to mute you, but what I'll say here is two things that I see, and just the research in me is all this conversation is two things that speak here. We know we have a fear problem, and we know we have an economics problem. And I believe one actually begets the other. I think they work in tandem, and I think they show up in tandem in that we have this fear thing. Because to be honest, and if the truth be told, there's some of us African American, we walk in certain neighborhoods, we scared of other African Americans, if the truth be told. You know, they clench their pocketbooks and they lock their car doors when they go through certain neighborhoods because, hey, maybe the way he looks, and it just, so we do it, to be honest, sometimes we do it to ourselves, okay? Also, speaking to the economic piece, like Pastor Davis was saying, and I see it all the time in the school, that some kids do get treated a little better when their parents have money. If they African American, they have money. If they Latino and they have money, it's a social economic issue on some level. If you have access to money, that means you have better access to health care. You're not in food deserts. You have better health. You get better access to education in general, so you're able to reason a little bit better. So when we start talking about this, two things, like I said, are really standing out is the fear and the socioeconomic piece of this. Now, I know that, we've already been on an hour, and I want to allow some people right now, to be honest, we have a strong Facebook audience, and I want to, a couple of questions, a couple of things that they may want to ask in our panelists. So those who are on Facebook and Periscope, this is your time now to put in a question or two, and I can ask that to our panelists, and then we're going to cut this off. I think this has been a good discussion because we need to have more of these just to talk and get things out and just, what I call chop it up and actually hear the different contrasting views. So if anybody have any questions out there, I saw one question that came up, and I think, Pastor Davis, you can speak to this. One person asked, if you start these social justice programs in the church, what kind of activities would they do? Can you speak to that a little bit?
And for me, it's a work in progress. I am brand new to this as a continual piece, but I think speaking to the first level is we have to, first of all, know our community. And I think in a lot of cases, in a lot of our churches, and I travel across the country and literally around the world, in a lot of cases, our churches are not engaged in community. They don't even know their community. They just know the church is there. So I think you got to create open doors, opportunities for people to just come to the church, come by the church, visit the church. That's not service related. I think everything doesn't have to be a revival or a ministry opportunity, but it just needs to be a social gathering. It could be we're gonna grill some hamburgers, hot dogs. Come by and have a hamburger, so we can just meet people and know who's in our community and just learn them and let them also learn church is a vehicle not only to address the spiritual needs but also the social needs. I think then we have to do a very careful understanding or gain a careful understanding of what are the scenarios in our community. Is there a police issue? Is there a jail issue? Is there an educational divide that is systemic to our community that we need to be speaking to? We need to also actively engage our leaders and make sure they understand that we're going to hold them accountable as voters, as taxpayers, for them to address the issues of concern. And it has to relate to what's going on. So I think, and then we have to be troubleshooters. If a situation arises, if a situation presents itself, no, I'm not going to get a weapon and go out and get somebody. But I am going to use the system to address that and make sure that people understand somebody is watching this besides the victim's families. A lot of that's about the fact that sometimes nobody's watching it but the victim's family and the victim's lawyer. But if the community knows that somebody else is watching, someone else is looking, it changes the paradigm. And it may not be sweeping, but if you can save one family at a time, one neighborhood at a time, then we've affected positive change.
I will say just a few weeks ago, I was in an African-American church in Greensboro. We were having a conversation with the chief of police and several of his officers. So we were talking about how they train, why they train, are they going to change some of their training methods? We want to have conversations with them directly in that audience. So these are things that's the way you begin to address some of these issues, and they have to hear us. It was I thought, a fantastic example of what Bishop was talking about right there. It was people gathered together with leadership of the city, with the police force, asking them, what is your plan? How do you approach situations? And so we were able to get those answers, and they're working on how they train and why they train, what the situation is. So at least they've had that conversation with us. A minute ago, I love you, man. I'm going to tell you right now. And you said white people are the problem. So you lump me in one large group of people that we the problem. And the fact of the matter is, it's not about, I don't believe I'm the problem. I'm a pretty decent fellow most of the time, okay? And I think you'd like to know me at some point in time. But the fact is, we're not the issue here. We're not the only issue. It is every one of us together realizing what the problem is. white people in power is a funny thing to say, because last 8 years hasn't been a white person in power. We've got struggles, and let's be honest about this. Our president, whom I have respect for, because the Bible tells you to respect, I don't care who they are, didn't get where he is without the white vote too. So we got to know that we're supposed to be together in all this stuff. And when we speak language like you're speaking, you just told everybody that thinks it's the way you do, I'm the enemy, and I'm the problem.
I haven't said anything about you. I don't know you personally. I'm talking about white people in power and white privilege and white racism and supremacy. We got a black president, but he doesn't control or run the country like that. There's a Senate and there's a House of Representatives. Right. And he's called hell by white racists in Congress. So when we're dealing with white supremacy, it's politics, it's religion, it's gender. So white people in power in the United States have historically mistreated and abused black people. That's documented. From the time they left Europe, traveled to Asia, Africa, to Latin America. When Europeans came to a country, they brought atrocities and death, and they left death. So when we talk about changing society, you got to look at those that are in power that can create change. If 84% of evangelicals and conservatives or Republicans are unwilling to acknowledge that racism impacts black people's lives, then their solutions that we suggest, they are not going to hear us. And I'm not saying anything about you. I'm talking about the system that allows white privilege to thrive and to survive. If you're really radical and you're a white person, I support you. Got love for you. But we are addressing some real issues, and it's not just hidden behind economics. Because you can't talk about economics without talking about inequalities and race from school, from desegregation, and on and on and on. That's what I mean.
Well, one of the things I wanted to speak to, and I had the privilege of speaking this message one time, is I came across the IE, I think it's called the IAT out of Harvard. And what the IAT out of Harvard does is it's actually a study there to actually basically almost measure how racist you are. And, you know, of course, a lot of people walk around, you know, I'm not racist, or I'm colorblind. And I tell people all the time, that's 100% lie. Nobody's colorblind. We all see color. You don't think you want to see color, but you see it. So one of the things is educating yourself to realize, where do you actually stand on the spectrum? So I took this test myself. I encouraged my pastor to take it, and it was eye opening. I kind of knew I was, but I believe it was more eye opening to him than it was me, that he realized after he taken the test, they said, you know what, I'm a little bit more slanted than I thought I was. Because we all, in our own mind, we're the best thing since sliced bread. But when we actually get tested, or we actually put something to measure against that, and say, oh, maybe I'm not as good as I thought I was. Now that I acknowledge that, what that does is it gives me a chance to start. So, for instance, I already know I slant a little bit pro-black. So when I see a situation, I have to stop first and say, well, Peter, you already know you +1 on the pro-black scale. So stop, really think about it, really digest what's going on before you speak. Versus, cause if I was always in the middle, then I could just always speak to it all the time. And I'm not there, because none of us are perfect. And I believe that's part of what the church brings to it, is that we all working to where? To get to the middle towards perfection. But we all have these impurities in us that we have, whether it was how we grew up culturally, how we was educated, whatever. But if you identify, okay, I am here. So when I look at a situation and say, okay, like I said, I already know I'm +1 on this scale. Maybe, as white, he knows that he's +1 on that scale. So now, his first instinct is like, oh, that's just somebody being lazy, or that's just another black person acting up. Then I stop and think, well, I'm already here. So when I stop and think about it and I look a little deeper, then I don't see it as that. And I think that's what we need to be, number one. Now, for the officers and stuff, you're right, they need that training has to exist, but it's very hard to get that, to do that in that split second. So what we're looking at is, how do you make that decision in a split second? Right. And, sometimes, we have great people who made bad decisions in 1 second that changed their lives, unfortunately. And that's the nature of the beast. But that kind of educated us, realizing, okay, this is where I'm at. This is why, I'm here because of whatever reason or whatever things I've been through. But however, I know that I'm in this space.
But you speak to something that is important, and that is that you have to be open to be taught and to even know yourself better. Mm-hmm. And it's very easy to look at a situation and immediately place the majority of the blame on someone outside of your community. And I don't want to, sound judgmental to African Americans, but we haven't done an effective job in some cases of policing our own selves, taking care of our own communities, raising our own children, educating our own, and providing for our own. And so we've put ourselves in some cases at the mercy of people because we haven't done it. And it's very easy to sit back and to cast blame when I think there's responsibility all the way around, that we have to become, one of the elements that I'm always concerned about is the absence of Black men in their own homes, to teach, to guide, to correct, to train, to develop the strength and character of the next generation.
There's a report that refutes that. There's a report that actually says that Black men are actively engaged in their children's lives. I just read it a few months ago. And
I would love to see that report. Please send me the link. But my experience has been from 27 years in the school system that in so many cases we're absent and we're not there and we're not engaged. And so and part of that is systemic racism, because in the slavery system you remove the Black man from his family. You make him just a laborer and you make him just someone to give seed, but not to stay there and develop the seed that he sows. And so there's a cultural paradigm that goes back to the slave mentality that we have to overcome. That I'm assigned to protect my family, to shelter my house, to raise my children, and to be there. And when I still meet young women who tell me that this guy got them pregnant and now that she can't find him, and now he doesn't want to do this and do that, we still got a problem. And I'm not saying we created the problem, but you have to look at it. My father did not raise me, okay? He wasn't in my life. But I made a vow to myself and to God that only the cemetery would take me from my wife and my children. And for 26 years, I have kept that vow. So just because you grew up without a father doesn't mean you have to become the next guy that walks away from his family. So I'm saying there's enough responsibility. We can throw blame all day long, but we've got to look at where's our responsibility. Yes, we have been failed by the system. I agree with you completely. But we have also failed in the system ourselves in a lot of cases. And we have to own that and accept that. And I agree with you. It's my job to defend my house and protect my house. Now, it doesn't mean I'm going to chase down somebody and shoot them. But if I'm there, I can protect my house. If I walk away, I can't save my house. And I can't protect my house. And if every man would save his house, that would go 50% towards changing the ills of society by men just protecting their own house.
Well, there's no question that hatred is taught. Over time, hatred is taught, without question.
White supremacy is hate teaching. That's in the school books. That's in the textbooks. So it's not Black people hating white people. It's white people understanding the different diversity that exists in the United States.
It's both. It's both.
And Dr. Peter Ely mentioned a testimony about that same test. And I did it because I wanted more information about who I am. What do I think? And I found out I was 1 point leaning towards white. And so it's affected even how in this conversation right now, how I think. I'm pausing, I'm looking and go, wait a minute. I got to hear the story. I got to understand why. I got to realize there's something else going on here. It's this kind of talk, this kind of communication, and knowing more about who I am that helps me learn and helps us come together. So there is a way to make this work. There is hope in this whole situation. There is hope. But we got to work towards it intentionally and not just go after the big issues as if this is going to solve it because I'm going to get angry.
From a powerless people perspective, it's on the dominant culture to change their behavior and attitude towards us. They know who we are and what we're trying to do. And I dislike the pathology that Black fathers are abandoning their family, and that's why we have so many social ills. Social ills were created by those in power, those that control the banks, those that control industries and businesses. When you got historical Black towns that were burned down by vigilante groups and nobody was brought to justice, you can't tell me I should believe in this country. when you have vigilante groups raping and manipulating black women since enslavement and today, I can't talk about being a friend when those in power are not willing to change. And if those in power are not willing to change, then we force them to change or we take them out.
And the way we take them out is we go, we vote, and we vote,
very simple.
And we use our money and our economic power and all these kind of things, right? Not just go out and physically take somebody out. I mean, because at some point, like he was saying, the Bible speaks, you live by the sword, you're going to die by it. And, we've seen that narrative one too many times already. So there's other ways to do it.
Use the Bible to enslave black people. They use the Bible to enslave us. Slaves, obey your masters. I'm not going to use that same tool and try to change the paradigm when that book was forced upon us. We didn't agree to accept that doctrine or that teachings. They forced us to learn the Bible. And then they give us a watered down version of it. How can we use the slave captive's religion to empower us when the slave captive's religion was used to manipulate us and abused us?
Because you learn the word for yourself. You can take any book, you can take any document, you can take any doctrine, and you can manipulate it and contrive it to say anything you want to say. The same thing, and I'm not Muslim, but they use the same Quran that teaches peace to promote radical Islam. So you can take any school of thought, any philosophy, and you can mutate it to make it say what you want to say by taking it out of context. And I agree, people took scripture out of context. They do now take scripture out of context. But that's, once again, the job of the church is to speak the truth to power. And the church has been the biggest revolutionary instrument in human history. It brought down the Roman Empire. It conquered feudalism. And believe it or not, it's even addressed communism. Every power structure that is oppressive, the word of God, the church has been a vehicle for change.
The Catholic Church sanctioned slavery. The Pope sanctioned slavery in the 15th century. He said, conquer those natives and make them work for you in the name of God.
And Catholicism is just one voice of Christianity. It's not totality.
So when Martin Luther nailed the 99 Theses to the door, he opened up different denominations. And all those denominations are not benefiting black people.
Well, Catholicism wasn't the first religion, Christian faith anyway. It wasn't the first Christian faith. All right. Catholicism came some 300 years after the institution of the church was created by the Holy Spirit at Pentecost. So historically, there's a misunderstanding of even Catholicism being the flagship of Christianity. It's not.
Right. And when we talk about authenticity,
but it's not.
Well, Christianity has its roots in ancient Kemet. It's not authentic. The characters, the biblical characters, the story were not original. They were derived from the people in North Africa. So when you talk about the Bible, you're talking about stories that have been passed down, that's been changed, and it's not authentic.
And that's an opinion I don't share. I believe that the Bible is the authentic word of God, that it contains the principles of life and living, and that when people follow biblical principle, it changes not only them, it changes their community when they practice their faith. And we'll have to agree to disagree on that point. The Bible to me is the word of God. It's God's word. It is God's principles. It's God's precepts. And that's what I live by. That's what governs my life. That's what's kept me saved and sane for over 40 years of living by those principles.
All right. So at this time, I don't, as moderator, I don't want us to get too far off track.
I live by a different code.
We don't want to get too far off track because this was about one thing, and now we're going to another. And Kelvin, I always invite you out to come hang out with some of us apologists, and we can deal with that commit thing. I didn't kill that 3 or 4 times for you, so I'll do it again. But anyway,
you haven't killed it, Peter.
We'll talk later. But at any rate, the time has grown late. This has been a wonderful discussion. I'm really, and I think our audience on Facebook is really liked it. I mean, the comments have just been going on and on and on. I'm going to post this. This will be there to share. But I want to thank all my panelists for coming, and I want to give each one of you, 2 minutes to say a final word. and then we're gonna cut this off and call it a night. So I guess we'll start in the top left corner, Michael. Pastor Michael, you can give your final thought on this, and we'll end with Bishop Davis.
All right, a couple quick things to say. Number one, just real fast while we're talking about it, I went through the website just real quick, and I keep the same number. 72% of black kids are raised by single-parent homes in the United States. 72%. So that speaks to the fatherless in our homes. And this is the reality we're dealing with on so many levels. The next thing I want to say is this. I believe there's only one race. Ultimately, there's only one race. That's the human race. And we as a human race have many cultures within that race. We are one race. And we are supposed to do everything we can to come together under this understanding that Jesus Christ died for us. That's my mission. That's my purpose. That's my calling. But I am not colorblind. I recognize that we are different. I recognize that we all come from different places. But that's what makes us stronger. When we get to a place where we realize that we are different, that's what makes us stronger. Not being the same makes us stronger. So I enjoyed this conversation tonight, and I withheld some things because I want us to have strength and peace together. And I think we're going to do this again. But I want to keep doing it so that we come to a place where we learn to love each other and succeed together. So that's where I'm at tonight. I want to thank all of y'all for having a great conversation.
Mr. Watson?
Yeah, when we really get serious about change and social change, we got to drop the doctrines, man, come out of our religious cloth and really address this on another level. I sincerely think we need a paradigm shift because it ain't working for black people. This guy that y'all talk about, you keep talking about, ain't working for black people. Praying and keep opening the Bible 2,000 years ago, it ain't working for us. So it needs to be some kind of a shift in our thinking. And once we recognize that, thought the shackles of religion, begin to think politically, strategically, and then we do like other groups have done, like the Jews. We bond together. We use cooperative economics to enrich our communities. We begin to raise and teach our kids in our own schools and start depending on those in power to educate us. That's the kind of revolutionary thinking we need. And this idea of one race, hey, that's complete nonsense. There's no one race. No, never has been. There's always been differences and diversity in cultures and ethnic groups. And when we talk about a serious dialogue on race, you got to come out of your comfort zone. You got to be uncomfortable to hear the ideas and opinions of those that are not empowered, those that are being persecuted and exploited. Oftentimes, that voice is not heard. And so you create this paradigm as if, black fathers are the reason that black people got all these issues. That's some bullshit right there. It's not that. It's historical other reasons that's affecting our communities. Systemic problems that date back before the civil rights movement and after. So don't use the pathology that black people are the cause of their own problems. Nah, that's some nonsense right there. So when you really want to take the blinders off your eyes and engage in real revolutionary dialogue, take the time and analyze our communities. Not from your perspective, but from those who can't speak for themselves.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. And we're going to end with the Bishop. Bishop Davis, will you end us off here, please, sir?
First of all, thank you, Dr. Ely, for arranging this dialogue. It's been enlightening. It's been refreshing. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I maintain that the church is ordained by God to be the transformational force of humanity. It's his vehicle. I understand the frustration that I've heard tonight, and I respect it, although I don't agree with the solution to it, because the pathway of unrighteousness just leads to more unrighteousness. And if you change the power structure and flip the script with unrighteous people, you're going to get more of the same, just in a different hue and a different color. The only way that we're going to transform society is the church has got to be that transformational agent, working one person at a time, but also working with the power structure to be that prophetic voice for truth, for reason, for dialogue. And as I said earlier, I'm not, and just to make this point, not to go back and forth, but I never said that we were the cause of our problems, but we have to take our responsibility for our area of the problem. Everything that's happened, because if I'm born with one leg, I can't blame society that I only have one leg. I got to figure out how to walk anyway. And so even if life is hamstring me or I've been hurt systemically, I've still got to live because I have a responsibility to myself to live. And I've chosen, and I make this very clear, it's always a choice. I've chosen to use biblical principle, the Word of God, the power of the Holy Spirit in my life to transform my life and for God to use me to help transform the lives of others. That is my mission that I will continue to do, broadening my scope to look at the ills of society and to address those as forcefully and as powerfully as I can. But thank you for this dialogue. I've enjoyed myself thoroughly.
All right, so as we prepare to end this, I just want to say thank you to everybody who's joined us on Facebook. I ask that you, once I post this, you all share it. And I look forward to doing this again here in the near future. I already have the next topic that I want to deal with, and with a completely different group. Because I believe, as a evangelical, born-again believer, y'all know I make no bones about it, and about who I am. Because I am who I am because of God's mercy and His grace. Because it could have been a very different narrative for myself. But even in that, I believe God has called me to speak to the powers that be, in that we're not going to sit back and just allow things to happen anymore. We need to get out there and we need to talk about these things. And I invited Kelvin on purpose because I'm not scared. That we're friends. And even though we have different views, Kelvin is my friend and I love him. And I think he knows I love him. And, when I first met Kelvin had dreadlocks down to his back and it was chewing on a stick. And I was like, what's that stick? And we shared this time. And even over the years now, it's been almost 20 years since I even seen each other, but we still can reach out. And to me, that's what the love of Jesus is about. That even at the end of the day, I can still reach out to my brother. Because the Bible says he that shows himself friendly has friends. And I look forward to having this talk again. And maybe not in this particular vein, but on the next time, we want to try to do this once a month. So today was our first time to do this, and I think it went very well. And I just appreciate everybody who's been a part of this, that made this happen. And with that said, I think it's time for us to get off this thing. God bless you all. Y'all all have a good night. Thank you on Facebook Live. Thank you, Periscope. Thank you to all my panelists. And at some point, maybe they're going to let me be able to do this directly through my computer, and I ain't got to rig it up. But nonetheless, it worked, and it worked fine. So God bless you all. Take care. Y'all have a wonderful night, and we're going to turn you.